Okay, everyone,
Okay.
welcome to another AI conversation, and I'm joined today by Sahaj. Welcome to AI Conversations.
Thank you for having me on the show today.
Yeah,
I really appreciate this opportunity.
yeah, that's great. And yeah, we were just talking right before we started that your background is more in the AI safety and AI ethics and governance. So maybe for people who don't know you yet, maybe just give a brief background on what you do.
Sure. So I'm a final year PhD student in Department of Informatics at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and my current doctoral research focuses on looking at ethical implications of AI governance and data-driven policy making. Now, given that the scope of this domain is kind of pretty broad and vast,
Still, yeah.
like it's not possible to accommodate the entirety of this domain into a single doctoral thesis. So, in order to accommodate the requirements of my thesis, I'm involved in several projects. One of my flagship projects is called the Open Explainability Protocol,
Mm-hmm.
where we are developing a set of safety guidelines for deployment of these AI systems. The aim here is to kind of bridge the gap between how the software developers, like those who develop these AI models, can imbibe the ethical principles of transparency and explainability right into the privacy by design stage of model development rather than the later stages of deployment evaluation, so that we can at least mitigate or minimize the unfair or unpredictable outcomes when the model arrives at a certain decision. While we cannot bring down the level of bias to zero given the state of AI that we are sitting in, but through early adoption of such measures in the model pipeline, we can at least try to ensure to bring down the negative impact caused by the model decision. And we take this through a human in the loop approach.
Hmm.
Now, you must be wondering, why a human in the loop approach? There are two reasons here. First is that we cannot let the systems be completely autonomous,
Mm-hmm.
because that might lead to a lot of undesired outputs, which might bear more negative consequences than desired. And the second reason is that the end users, the people who will be the ultimate target audience for these systems, might not always have a necessary background in AI or data science. So they might not understand how and why the model arrives at a certain decision or why a certain output was made. Because of these two reasons, we need a human in the loop approach here.
Yeah. Maybe I'll start with that point about having a human in the loop. In your experience, how much of current AI development considers that as a major component? Because everywhere I look, automation is all the rage. You know what I mean? So is that a key assumption that it's something most AI research and development needs to consider, or by and large it depends on the context of what systems are being developed?
Yes, actually, the question you posed is of critical concern and very relevant given the time that we are sitting in. So, across different industries, even starting from very small startups to large scale tech companies like Microsoft, Google,
Mm-hmm.
everyone has been getting into this AI hype
Mm-hmm.
because it's a very critical and emerging technology. And a lot of AI based solutions are also being developed these days. But according to my opinion, rather than seeing AI as replacing human
Mm-hmm.
or the tasks that humans are doing and automating those tasks, I see more of it as complementing humans in perform and augmenting the human productivity and efficiency. Well, there is nothing, not even the most super later form of AI that can replace human cognition.
Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately, the AI models that we are developing are as good as the data that you feed in. And who is collecting this data?
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, it's the humans.
Yeah.
So the model is as good as the data that you feed to it. And the data that you feed to the model is a reflection of human thinking human cognition, and human bias. That's why we have, through several instances across the timeline, we have observed what kind of bias occurs in these AI systems when you let them make their own automated decision, and how people from different sections or backgrounds are affected by it.
Right. Yeah, maybe I can deep dive on that because one of the areas that I'm currently working with is the offshoring industry. So the business process, which is happening in the Philippines, happens in India. And one of the big questions is how much generative AI, for example, is going to affect the offshoring of jobs. And an interesting piece of research, which I can send to you after our talk, is there was some 2022 paper that looked at the effect of digitalization on work. And it really depends, at least what they found is it really depends on the nature of the work. If it's highly repetitive, highly, it's like similar to factory labor, the effect is quite stark. Humans are really removed and streamlined out. While in the case of white collar type work with some judgmental input, which actually includes contact center, for example, or BPOs, the work tends to get enriched. The human capacity is expanded. They are able to accommodate more volume, and we're kind of betting on the latter. But in your experience or perspective, how do you see the BPO industry getting affected in its current state now, and if there's any changes we need to make to prevent kind of that human replacement or displacement?
Yes, this human replacement and the fear surrounding it is what leads people to kind of a little hesitance in adoption of AI based practices.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of AI tools are out there easily and readily available. But then, through some of our research, we've kind of observed that when you tell someone that an AI based tool will perform this kind of task with you, they'll be kind of little wary, a little suspicious about dealing with this non human entity. The
Mm-hmm.
non human factor plays a very important role here because that's how the human psychology works. Like when you have to deal with something that you do not understand or you do not trust, you're bound to not accept it very readily.
Yeah. Yeah.
And given that a lot of warehousing tasks and fulfillment delivery tasks, the last mile delivery tasks are being automated by these kind of AI-based robots and tools. So obviously, there are chances of people being replaced by it and people losing their jobs to these kind of tasks. But if you have observed that the tasks where humans are being replaced are more of mundane and repetitive in nature.
Mm-hmm.
They do not require a higher level of thinking, cognition, or emotion,
Mm-hmm.
or rather the human intellect. But the tasks where these things are involved, there is no chance that AI will anytime soon, or maybe in the next decade, replace humans.
Mm-hmm.
So while AI is also like taking some of the jobs away in the market, it's creating ample of opportunities. Now, as you know that I work in the domain of AI safety and ethics, where as soon as you deploy AI-based systems into any industry that you are dealing with, you need people like the data protection officer, AI ethics officer, AI strategy planning officer. So while it's replacing people, it's also creating new opportunities.
Yeah.
So I would say that there's no fear, there should be no fear surrounding the adoption of these systems.
Yeah, that's actually a great point you're making about job creation. And it's nice that you're bringing up kind of these new jobs like the ethics and the safety jobs. Maybe because these are jobs that are not quite openly known or thought about by people, especially the safety part. It sounds for some it sounds very abstract. So could you help flesh out what would, let's say, an AI safety or an AI ethics officer probably want to look at as part of their role, or at least help flesh it out for people?
Yes. So right now, as you mentioned, that these roles are kind of not very relevant or openly available at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
starting from small scale startups to large scale tech companies, everyone is getting into the AI hype because of the FOMO. So they are kind of using it, but then there's a lack of awareness surrounding the responsible usage of these systems.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where these kind of jobs or roles are required. Like when you are using some system, say for example, let's take the example of a healthcare setting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, healthcare is a strictly regulated field. Be it any country or any region across the globe, the authoritative bodies are pretty much concerned about it because of two reasons. One is that it's directly connected to our mental and physical well being. And second is the personal and sensitive nature of the data that we deal with in the healthcare setting.
Mm-hmm.
So, now through some of our research, we have also kind of observed that when you tell someone that a robot will perform a surgery for you, or maybe an AI based tool will perform a diagnostic screening for you, people will be a little suspicious like, hey, why not a doctor? Why an AI based tool or robot?
Yeah.
Right? Why? Because they do not understand the inner workings of this system, and there is a kind of black box surrounding these systems.
Mm-hmm.
So, as long as you do not understand how those systems work and produce output, you are bound to not trust them. And that's why we need to enhance and foster users' trust that their data is safe and secure with us and not vulnerable to any data breaches or unauthorized access by third parties.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the role of AI ethics, governance, and strategy officer comes into picture.
Mm-hmm.
We need these people on the advisory and ethics committee to ensure that the organizations adopt responsible AI practices into their planning accordingly. A lot of compliances and policies are in the space out there. Like the EU passed the AI Act. Just today, the Data Security Act came into implementation.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the executive order by the White House. So a lot of these policies are in place out there, but often the clients and the organizations do not know what's in store for them. And that's why these kind of roles are becoming a necessary requirement slowly and gradually to help business organizations with their enterprise planning.
Yeah. So to what extent do you see, obviously, being based in the US, you guys are going to be ahead of the rest of us. To what extent do you see these roles being triggered by regulation? And what to what extent can they be something that companies proactively do on their own? Because I'm just thinking out loud. Some progressive companies might already start kind of carving out these kinds of jobs within maybe either existing risk management or audit functions. But then if we have regulation coming in that requires such a role, then that's a totally different question, right? So in your perspective, is this something that companies can already proactively do, or is it something that they'll have to wait for government to talk about?
So I would say that right now, uh, these large companies like the top five, Microsoft, Google,
Mm-hmm.
Meta, they Amazon have some, though, even though not on a large scale basis, but on a small scale basis, they have few roles and open positions for these kind of opportunities. But even within these large companies, there are not these positions are not so readily available
Yeah.
because right now the scenario is such that if you are operating within, say, European Union and you have to abide by certain regulatory compliances of the EU Act or the Data Protection Act, or if you are operating within US, you have to abide by those compliances. They are right now they are seen typically as a requirement rather than something that's mandatory or required to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Hence, there's not a lot of awareness surrounding these.
Right. Okay. You mentioned a concept earlier called privacy by design, and that's another thing that maybe is relatively new for most AI and let's say machine learning developers. So can you share a little bit of how that could work in terms of integrating privacy? and safety early on, as you said, in the modeling process compared to like the default, which is
Yes,
it's done after.
sure. So currently, what generally happens is that once the AI model is designed, then at a later stage, uh, people kind of look into, like when it's being deployed or put into testing purposes, then people look at how the output is given, or why an output is arrived at, or what features are more emphasized on as compared to other features. And then if they find some fault, either they try to ignore it if it's a minuscule in nature, or if it's something major that has very broad implications,
Mm-hmm.
then they have to go back from scratch and redesign or redeploy it, which is computationally and timely very resource intensive.
Mm-hmm.
Hence, in our research, we have proposed this idea of privacy by design, so that integrating these ethical principles right into an earlier stage of model design, you can mitigate the negative consequences, or at least try to reduce those negative consequences in an earlier stage and make it computationally efficient.
Right. I'm thinking out loud in a way evangelizing the use of privacy by design. Part of it is mitigating, as you said, the risks, right? Can you elaborate on what are some of the big and small possible risks that could result by ignoring this? Because I think most companies are too busy looking at, the profits that they could get from automation, all the upside. What's the downside that people could be missing out?
So, the first question that generally companies should ask themselves when implementing any AI based solution is that, is AI actually required? Not all problems require an AI based solution. It could be solved by something very simple, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you are trying to automate something, not necessary that you need an AI based robot or something right out of a sci fi movie.
Mm-hmm.
No, it could be something on a very smaller scale and yet produce very efficient results. So that's the first question companies should take into consideration when working on their strategic planning phase.
Mm-hmm. In
And
terms of,
then going
yeah, go ahead.
further, yeah, and then going further, as you mentioned, the people look at the bright side, like, okay, solutions are being automated, time is being reduced, productivity is being increased, I'm able to do more amount of work in less amount of time. Then look at the flip side. Is it actually serving the purpose that you are using it for?
Mm.
Whether any group or section within your data is being underserved or underrepresented? Those are some of the safety questions that you need to pose before putting it into a large scale commercial purpose.
Right. In terms of kind of a threshold, because I remember also reading a paper recently, I don't know if it's an MIT one, that there is a natural threshold to automation. That beyond that, let's say if you have 100% of tasks, I think they were saying it's roughly around 30% before the cost of the automation starts to become economically unviable. For example, one easy thing to look at is cloud costs, right? If you want to deploy these models in some cloud environment, that can really build very quickly. So economic cost is one. Can you also talk about other implications of just naively diving into artificial intelligence unnecessarily?
Yes, as you correctly pointed out, since these things are very resource intensive, the computing cost associated with deployment of these systems is very high. And hence, right now, companies kind of choose to employ it maybe on an experimental basis, just so as to avoid gaining any disadvantages in terms of economical measures. The second thing is that the more advanced AI systems that you put into deployment or for commercial purposes, even though there is a level of automation associated with it, you need humans in the loop ultimately to monitor those systems.
Hmm.
Who will be like who should be held accountable if there's some kind of failure, right?
Mhm.
There are no existing guidelines on the same, either in the EU Act or the executive order by the White House. And that's why we need more humans. And the more humans you put to use, obviously you have to look for higher level of expertise, you need to educate people more, and hence the whole loop continues.
So it's not necessarily 100% displacement because you need to hire more
Yes,
humans to watch the
absolutely,
shop.
absolutely. When you're actually trying to cut down the cost, but it actually becomes counterproductive.
Ends up blowing it up, actually. Okay.
Yes.
Um, I know you only have a limited amount of time after this, but maybe just help flesh out what are some good high-level principles when implementing kind of an ethics or safety framework, particularly around AI, because some companies might feel like it's reinventing the wheel again, but actually maybe many of these things are already known. So from your perspective, if you have like a top five or a top 10 that you want to share, what are these principles that we have to look at?
Yes, as you mentioned, that often the companies feel that things like uh, ethics, fairness, accountability are all theoretical or abstract in nature.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's actually what's required out there. Say, for example, if we take a very common scenario of a loan approval rejection case,
Yeah.
right? So when banks are trying to process the loan applications through an AI-based system, then all of us know the negative consequences associated with it, that a certain section of people are being rejected loan no matter whatever their background or no matter however good their credit score or the approval rating is.
Yeah.
Why does this happen? It's because the model has its own limitations because of the nature of data that is given to the model.
Right. Right.
And
Okay.
and this is a we took the very common scenario of a loan approval, which obviously has negative consequences. But if you take it even further and employ it in sensitive settings like defense, healthcare, which has very wide ranging and direct impact on the lives of people,
Mm-hmm.
then things can get very complicated and sensitive in nature. That's why putting guardrails and safety nets surrounding the usage of these systems becomes of critical importance. Hence, according to me, utilizing the initiatives like privacy, security, fairness, robustness, and accountability
Mm-hmm.
becomes of vital importance when dealing with these systems. The more robust your AI system is, the less vulnerable it is from the outside attacks. The more private and secure manner you store your user data, the more users will be able to build trust in your systems. And the more transparency and explainability introduced into your systems, the fairer your outcomes will be. And that's how you can build a resilient and ethical AI ecosystem.
Yeah, perfect. Well said. Okay, just before we conclude, um, maybe ways for people to collaborate with you or certain projects that you'd be happy to work with people, maybe just share to the audience so we can also cascade this.
Sure, thank you for pointing that out. So I have currently developed an AI governance framework, which acts as a kind of like a template for the businesses and the organizations to adopt responsible AI practices into their enterprise planning.
Yeah,
So now there's no one size fits all solution in this case.
yeah.
Like different sectors across different industries have various requirements. As I mentioned, if we are dealing with healthcare, they might want to prioritize the privacy and security of user data as compared to some other thing. Whereas if we are dealing with, say, retail or e commerce, they might want to prioritize the user recommendations or reviews as compared to some other requirements.
Mm-hmm.
So, this framework has a potential advantage that it has these kind of moving blocks which can fit in based on the industry that we are dealing with. And given that in academia and research, we develop these kind of frameworks, guidelines, and protocols But then there remains a gap between what we develop and what's actually required by the clients and the organizations out there. That's why I want to go into this AI ethics consultation, responsible AI management, and strategic planning kind of space so as to assist organizations with their planning accordingly and see that they can deliver the best outcomes to a large section of society. So, if there's anyone in the space out there looking for potential collaboration opportunities with paid projects or paid consultation opportunities, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or through my email, and I'll be glad to respond.
Yeah, and we'll have Sahaj's LinkedIn and email on the description on this video. So, well, first I want to thank you for I know you have a very tight schedule, and it's a weekend for you at the moment. So, I want to thank you, Sahaj, for joining the podcast. I'd love to have you again on a sequel where we can dive deeper into some of the elements
For
that you
sure,
mentioned.
I'm looking forward to it. We can definitely schedule an hour-long conversation, and we can. And this topic is such an evolving landscape that we can keep on talking on it for hours and hours to come.
Absolutely. And yeah, on collaboration opportunities, I have a couple of ideas. So I'll share that with you on the chat later. Yeah, but first, I
Oh,
want to thank you for coming and yeah, hope to have you again on the show again.
and I would like to thank you for having me on this conversation today. I really cherish this opportunity.
Thank you very much and hope to see you.
Thank you.